Greetings. Oh, today I want to yap once again. This time not about fashion, but about anime. So, I have a couple characters that I want to talk about in particular, but more specifically, I am here to defend the villains. Now, there's a couple villain characters that I've picked out for today. So to start off with, if you watched my last stream, I talked a bit about Madoka Magica, a very popular magical girl anime, and I wanted to talk specifically about Homura, a character from Madoka Magica. Um, so Homura, by the end of where the series is at now, because there's a season of the show out, and then there's also a movie. So where the story's at now, Homura has kind of become a villain of sorts. She's made some certain actions that are, not the best. Um, but I really like Homura. I have an affinity for evil lesbians. So I I just want to talk about her a bit. Um, so Homura, if you don't know, uh, she okay, basically just to give you a recap. Madoka Magica, kind of a tragic, dark and edgy magical girl show. Um, and it's a situation in which the magical girls, although they become magical girls to fight against the witches that are causing despair and chaos in the human world, um, becoming a magical girl actually isn't that great because you make a wish and that can be just about anything of like either a wholesome wish or it can be a selfish wish, doesn't matter what it is. But like as a magical girl in this show, the more that you fight witches, the more that you yourself kind of fall into despair. And if you aren't able to cleanse yourself of that, you yourself will become a witch. Um, so we see that with some of the characters where they turn into witches because they couldn't fulfill their wish, basically. Um, so Homura, when we're first introduced to her, she's she's not very nice. She's not very nice. She comes off as very rude and very brash, and she kind of just pulls up on Madoka and is like, "Hey yo, don't become a magical girl." Actually, even though that seems super cool, you don't want to do that. Um, so obviously Madoka is confused. She still doesn't even fully understand what it means to be a magical girl. Um, so we're not entirely sure why Homura doesn't want her to become a magical girl. Come to find out, Homura has PTSD, essentially. My girl Homura has been through a lot. So Homura, we get a flashback, and we see that the timeline of Madoka Magica, that's not the first timeline. This becomes a kind of multi-timeline situation, which is kind of crazy for a what seems at first like a super cutesy magical girl show. Um, so in the first timeline, Homura is very shy. She's very awkward. She was bedridden in a hospital for a long time. She doesn't even really have any like family members. She doesn't have any friends. She got no friends. So she meets Madoka, and Madoka is like so sweet to her, so kind, and this really sticks out to Homura because she's like, "Hey yo, someone actually being nice to me, that's crazy." Which like girl, me too. But um, so Homura becomes friends with Madoka, with the rest of the girls. They're going about their little girly adventure. They become magical girls. It's all fine and dandy, and then Madoka freaking dies. Madoka dies, and more specifically, Homura has to kill Madoka to take her out of her misery because Madoka is dying because they reach what is essentially the final boss, which no one is able to defeat her. So that's when Homura makes her actual wish, which is to be able to go back to the time that she first met Madoka to try to redo things and save her. Now, this is interesting because technically speaking, technically speaking, she could have just wished to save Madoka's life. And that probably would have come with a caveat of like, then Homer dies or something like that. And I think that's interesting because, as then you'll see for the rest of the storyline, guys, I think Homer is just gay for Madoka. Like, she just does anything and everything, not even technically to save Madoka, but to ensure that Madoka lives just so that the two of them can be together forever. Um, so we see that Homura has lived out countless lives, time and time and time again. She's redone the timeline. She's gone back in time to when she first met Madoka, specifically so that she can try to save her again. Because every single time, like, Homura has seen Madoka die in front of her hundreds of times. So it gets to a point where Homura, she doesn't care about the magical girls anymore, like any of her other friends. She's also watched them die time and time again. So she kind of like doesn't even care about them anymore. She's like, "We're gonna die anyways. I'm here to save my homegirl." So she. But no matter how hard she tries, no matter how many times Homura has gone through this, she cannot save Madoka. Um, and so it gets to a point where Homura, she's no longer that sweet, shy, innocent girl that she once was. She becomes very cold and reserved and like kind of a bitch. And so, you know, it, I'm losing my train of thought, but basically, Madoka does a whole thing. Madoka becomes a god, by the way. This 12-year-old kawaii girl becomes a freaking universal god. She rewrites the entire universe so that witches don't exist anymore. And she's only able to do this because Homura has essentially sacrificed herself so many times trying to save Madoka. Madoka finally learns of this and is like, damn, bro, my fault, gang. Like, let me go ahead and just become a god to help you out because I feel bad that you did all that for me. Um, so you know, whatever. That's pretty much where the show ends off. Of Madoka rewrites the universe, which is it's more complicated than that. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's more so that magical girls will no longer become witches. They'll no longer fall into despair. Um, but this also means that nobody remembers Madoka. She's kind of just erased from the universe. So even Homer is the only one who like kind of remembers her, but it's almost like just a feeling of her. She doesn't remember her as like an existing person. Um, cut to the movie Madoka Magical Rebellion. Um, it starts off and you're kind of confused because characters that were dead by the end of the last season, now they're alive. Um, even one of the witches that killed one of the characters is now in her like little chibi form, and she's besties with the girl that she killed. So obviously you're like, what's going on? Um, and basically, Homura, initially she's very happy because Madoka is back. She's no longer a freaking universal god, but more specifically, like, Homura isn't even thinking about this. It's just to Homura, she's living out this perfect life with Madoka and all her friends, and everything is perfect and great and happy. Um, but it's almost too perfect, and this starts to make Homura question the things around her. Um, and she gets this feeling. She starts to realize the world that they're in, the world that they're currently in, isn't real. Uh, so basically, it's a witch's labyrinth, which is kind of like an entire false reality that a witch can create to trap magical girls inside of. Um, so Homer was like, "Damn, I don't know what's going on, but we're clearly trapped in a witch's labyrinth. This isn't real because these girls are supposed to be dead. Um, so what's going on?" So, you know, storyline stuff. She goes around looking for answers. She talks to the other magical girls about it. Blah blah blah. Um, spoilers, but come to find out, Homura is the witch that created this labyrinth. Homura is the one that created this false reality in which all the magical girls could live happily ever after together, and more specifically, that she could be with Madoka again. Um, so this sends Homura into a spiral because she's like, how could I do this? Like, how could I create this reality where I surpassed Madoka's own wishes to try to abolish witches? Like, how could I do this, essentially? So she feels that she betrayed Madoka and she just feels terrible. um so Homura's full witch transformation, she no longer looks like her regular self. She fully transforms into a witch. She's not even really attacking the other magical girls. She is walking to her own death. There's a giant guillotine and she's walking towards it and she's begging to be killed because she can't live with herself for what she's done and what she's created and how she betrayed Madoka. Um, the magical girls end up saving her. Um, they try to cleanse her of her despair that's making her a witch. Um, and things kind of go back to normal as they were. And so Madoka is once again back to god form. And so Madoka, she ascends down from the heavens in all of her angelic power. And she embraces Homura and she's like, it's okay now. Like, you're fine now, blah, blah, blah. And it was crazy. Homura said, "Nah, psych," grabs Madoka's wrist, pulls her in, literally rips her out of her angel form. It separates, and Homura takes control. Homura, once again, not able to grasp the fact that she would no longer, because now she's reliving it once again, that she's never going to see Madoka again. Madoka is going to go back to being a god. The universe is once again going to go back to how it was, and she'll even have no memory of Madoka. And in that moment, Homura realizes she cannot live with that. So Homura just fully stops the whole shebang, and she herself is able to rewrite the universe. And in rewriting the universe, um basically she makes it to where sorry, by taking away Madoka's god power, that's how she rewrites the universe. And so Homer herself becomes a demon. Um, and so now that Homura has rewritten the universe, she creates a universe in which, once again, everything's all fine and dandy. All the girls are back together. They're just going back to school like normal. Madoka is there and everything's fine. But once again, this is a false reality. This is just something to desperately try to distract herself from the fact that the real world is a world without Madoka. Um, so that's pretty much where the movie ends. So there is another movie coming out. We'll have to see where things go with that. But you know, hopefully they give you a good sense of, Homer's character, or at least specifically her actions. Um, some case for defending Homer. While yes, Homura's actions were selfish, especially if you take a look at Madoka's final wish versus Homura's final wish. Madoka committed an act of selflessness to sacrifice herself to kind of save the universe. Homura committed an act of selfishness to not really save the universe and just create a universe that was perfect for herself to stay with Madoka. Um, so I know that looks really bad. I know that that does not spell out a great personality, if you will. Um, but I would like to say that once again, Homura has been through it. It genuinely was countless amount of times that she tried and tried and tried to save Madoka. She watched all of her friends and her best friend die over and over and over again in terrible ways, and she was helpless to do anything about it, especially because at the start of the show, she herself was like the weakest magical girl. She didn't really have the strength like that. So her abilities really weren't that great either. So I imagine, you know, just the entire time she felt completely powerless to do anything, not only because like physically and magic wise she was weak, but she did, no matter what she tried, she could not save Madoka. um so I think it only makes sense that if you start out with the good intentions of trying to save someone you truly care about, but no matter how hard you try, it's not working, your initial feelings and mindset of good intentions and love and you just want to save this person, that's going to turn into something twisted. Because now it's no longer a matter of Madoka is just this friend that she cares about and wants to save, but it almost turns into Madoka is just this like idea that she needs to protect, because her friendship with Madoka, her memories of her is kind of just the same time period played over and over and over again. So it's not even like she has new memories and new experiences with Madoka, like a longer spinning, even though realistically, with how many times she's relived her time with Madoka, it's still the same time period, if that makes sense. So it's a weird contradiction where in a way she hasn't spent that much time with her, but at the same time she spent lifetimes with her. um so I can only imagine the kind of mental damage that would do on a person, let alone a freaking like 13-year-old girl who's going through life and death to save her friend. um so I'm sorry, time out. Let me see here. Sorry, apologies, gang. I'm looking at the chat. Bum, bum, bum. Blam, blam. Blam, 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 blam. Okay. Sorry, technical difficulties. Just had to pull up the chat for a moment. Um. So, anyways, sorry for the rant about the storyline and Homer's character and whatnot. I just have I'm just very fixated on Homura. Big fan. Um, but yeah, I would say my defense is, well, in the end, her actions cannot be justified because I mean, but it's kind of, I don't know. I feel like low key they could because like, while yes, her actions were selfish, at the same time, who's to say that the when Madoka rewrote the universe, who's to say that that was also better? Because she wasn't able to completely erase witches out of existence. Like magical girls still existed, they still had to fight off witches to save the world. So Madoka herself didn't save the world. She just kind of saved magical girls from not becoming witches themselves. You take a look at Homura though, and while she's now transcended witch status, she's now fully a demon. Um, she made a perfect world, even though it was a selfish one, even though it was a perfect world to her standards, it still was a world, excuse me, it still was a world without witches, you know, without suffering. Because even when the magical girls tried to question Homura on like, hey yo, like what did you do, my guy? Like what what is going on? This is not okay. Um, you know, they would then kind of stop and almost forget their train of thought, and they would just go back to feeling happy. So I don't know. I kind of feel like, you know, in a way, even though it's an illusion, it's still a better reality than the one that the magical girls were previously lived. Because if I'm remembering correctly, maybe I'm wrong, but even in the Madoka universe, where she got rid of witches, or sorry, where she got rid of despair, um, the magical girls that died before then, they were still dead. So, you know, is that like really better? Because in Homer's timeline, everyone's alive, everyone's chilling. They don't even have to be magical girls. They can just go to school and be regular happy girls. Um, so I don't know. I I would genuinely argue that while Homer is an antagonist, for sure, she goes against the wishes of the characters, and especially just directly goes against Madoka's literal wish. Um, it still was with these good, desperate like desperate intentions for sure, but still good-hearted intentions of she just wants her friend to be alive. She wants her friend to live a peaceful, happy life, and she wants to live that life together. Um, so I don't know. Don't shoot the messenger, but me personally, I feel like I said, um, there's definitely, I don't know. I feel like there's definitely a way that you could look at it in which Homura is truly not the villain. I mean, first off, the witches are the villains, like in general, and I know that might sound contradictory because Homura becomes a witch. Actually, nah. Kyubey is the villain. We don't talk about Kyubey enough. Kyubey is a little magical cat that gives all the girls their powers. There's a lot of, I don't know. I don't think they mentioned his like species, but they're an alien species. There's a ton of them. This guy is a menace. He looks like a little cutesy cat. Oh my gosh, a little cutie cat coming up to your window and be like, "Hey, do you want some magical powers? It could be so fun." No, these are demon cats. They want to experiment on the magical girls, and they basically absorb energy from the girls' despairs. They get off to these little girls suffering. So I'm like, if we want to talk about anyone being a villain, it is Kyubey and his entire species, 100%. That too, if you need any other freaking reason why Homura's reality is better, Homura, when she became a god of sorts, you know, technically a demon, but whatever, she was able to basically have Kyubey in her palm, the palm of her hand. Like she, I forget like exactly what she did, but it was kind of just like a part of her rewriting the universe where Kyubey could not do anything. Like she beat the life out of Kyubey, and he couldn't do anything about it. And finally, this man understood fear, because that was a whole thing. Like Kyubey and his species, they don't even understand human emotions. They don't even understand what it's like to feel pain and feel suffering. So they don't care about what they're doing to these girls. Um, and Homura made him understand what it's like to feel fear and pain. And I feel like that goes hard. All right. I feel like at the very least, we can give it to Homura that that was like a genuinely good thing that she did of teaching Kyubey his freaking lesson. So I, I'm just saying. um, but anyways, another character that I wanted to talk about. Let me hydrate myself. Hold on. someone in chat said, friendship is magic. I'm shooting the messenger for sure. Listen, listen. You're not wrong, but that's the thing. Friendship is supposed to be magic, right? Homura just wants to be with her friend, and she'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. And if anything, friendship is magic because her friendship with Homura gave her the ultimate magic. So, you know. um hey, well, we don't do piss break on camera. um you guys in chat are being silly. But anyways, next character. Uh a more common, more popular anime that y'all probably know about, Death Note. Death Note is a very interesting moral dilemma situation. Because, we have the character Light. He acquires the Death Note and he uses it to kill criminals. Now, obviously, just at a baseline, that sounds great. However, how that plays out ends up not so great. And, so it comes the argument essentially, do the ends justify the means? And I want to say yes. My guy literally stopped 70% of crimes and ended all wars. As something we could really use right now. So I feel like that's definitely, you know, sometimes you gotta do what it takes. Um, but I do want to talk about a few interesting things that are I would agree are not so justifiable, and then I'm gonna tie it all back into, at the end of the day, he's still not a villain. So my laptop is so far away. So becoming god of the new world isn't easy, bro. Exactly. How are you supposed to essentially become a god, completely change the world without a few mishaps in the process? So when it comes to Light, his dad was police chief, so from an early age he had this instilled sense of justice. He wanted to save the world. He wanted to make the world a better place and specifically rid the world of evil, right? Um so once he gets his hands on the Death Note, he's like, "Hey, yo, I can actually save the world. That's crazy." And it is a case where his original kind of naivete about having this almost childish wish of like, I'm going to save the world, um that does turn into a bit of arrogance because he acquires godlike power to where he could save the world. So first of all, I think as far as all of the things that you could do with something like the Death Note, um he did genuinely want to save people. He wanted to rid the world of evil, and there's a lot worse things that you could do with something like the Death Note. So, just off rip, the fact that his first thought of what he would do with that kind of power being to try to save people, I think that's already argument enough that he's not a villain. He has good intentions. Now, the problem does come that quite a few innocents were killed in the process. um so like I would say the main issue is Light didn't have as thorough of a process when it came to deciding which evil people he would kill, because he would just kill any criminal that would be up on the news the moment they were arrested, and so they didn't have a chance to go to trial to determine whether or not they were guilty. So just by that aspect, he did technically kill some innocents, and more specifically, he killed quite a few people that got in the way of his master plan. Um, but I mean, at the same time, if you are essentially a god in the way that Kira, or sorry, Light is, but same shit. Um, if you are a god that is going against all laws and normal structures of things of how we're supposed to deal with criminals, yeah, obviously you're gonna have people getting in the way, but it's also like, how are you gonna explain to them? Like, listen, guys, hold up, hear me out, hear me out. I need to kill anyone that I deem worthy of killing to save the world. But like, I pinky promise, I'm only gonna kill the bad people. So just let me go ahead and kill whoever I want. It'll be fine. Like, obviously the government's gonna be like, hey yo, no, like we're not gonna just let you do whatever. So it's not like Light could have gone to the government and be like, can I please kill whoever I want? Please. Like, that's not gonna work. So obviously he has to do his own thing and create his own plan and enact it on his own. And that's going to mean people getting in his way, especially people of the government and police force who, like I said, Light isn't exactly doing things legally, so that's going to be an issue. Um, so again, that's kind of part of the thing of like, do the ends justify the means? And I feel like it could. I feel like it really could. I feel like it does. Because like the I think the reason why people go back and forth about this a lot is like, oh well, Light, he didn't stop the root of the problem. He wasn't stopping the things that cause crime in the first place, like low income or people's upbringings or blah blah blah. And it's like, what do you want him to do about that? Literally, all he has is the power of the Death Note, a thing meant to kill people. In what circumstance is he going to be able to fix the political and economic state of the world by killing people? Like, there's really only so much that he can do. He really can't fully fix the systematic problems within the world that create crime. The most he can do is just stop crime once it happens, essentially by killing criminals once someone commits a crime. Um, so I really think he was doing the most that he could given the power that he had. Um, so I don't know, once again, 70% of crime, all world wars, like people were clearly afraid to even attempt doing any kind of crime because they could freaking have a heart attack and die immediately. So it's by creating the boogeyman of Kira, this nobody really knows who he is, but it's clearly someone's out there with some kind of power to kill any evildoer at will. Like, I feel like our current world could maybe benefit something like that. It's obviously not perfect. And again, yes, some innocents died. But it's like the trolley problem situation in which you have a train is coming down. It's either going to kill one person. Sorry, specifically, it's the train is on the path to kill three people, but you could pull a lever and instead it'll kill one person, right? It's kind of just what is the most reasonable sacrifice for the greater good. Oh, but hey, let's see what how chat feels about this. First of all, you guys are talking about some silly political topics. Let's see. Says, what do you mean a high school student can't fix the world by being the judge, jury, and executioner for whoever he sees fit? Right? Okay, that great that you bring that up. That's kind of another thing that I saw people talking about of like, well, who is Light to decide essentially what is wrong? Who, when in real life, for the example of judge, jury, executioner, when especially we're talking about the death penalty for criminals, yeah, normally it's an entire lengthy legal process of deciding whether or not a criminal gets the death penalty. It's many people involved that make that decision. But like, yeah, me personally, I feel as though like what really makes the difference between a group of people deciding whether or not to kill a criminal versus one person deciding whether or not to kill a criminal? Because I understand that, like, with a group of people, let's say it's like a group of five judges or something. I don't know how it works, but say it's a group of five judges that are all deliberating on whether or not this specific criminal deserves the death penalty. Um, there could be one judge out of that group that really thinks like, no, we got to kill this criminal. He's a terrible person. He's a menace to society. Like, no matter what, got to get him out of here. And he could be genuinely right in that belief that this criminal needs to die. But if all the other judges decide against him, then he's out of luck, and the criminal, well, I mean, he probably won't go free, but he doesn't die, and so then that's one evil person still in this world. So in a way, well, having the one person make that decision. Oh my god, excuse me. I'm being possessed. Um, well, having that one person, aka Light, who is the end all be all on who gets to live or die, then it's more what's the word I'm looking for? It's more definitive. Like it no matter what, if Light thinks someone should die, they will die. And as we saw, majority of the time, well, yes, like I said, a few witnesses aside, but majority of the time, it was a criminal dying. And even for the argument of like, oh well, the criminal they didn't get a chance to prove themselves innocent, or even if they were guilty, they probably would have gone to death row or whatever. It's still like clearly Light's thought process, his vision of sorts, was less about like which criminals deserve to die, like what's the severity of their crime and whether or not they should be allowed to live. Clearly his intentions were just, no, all criminals need to die. Like, no matter what, if you commit a crime, you're dead. And I mean, that's not the worst thing. Like, obviously, you could debate all day long about which crimes are truly that bad or whatever else. But if it's in the idea of ridding the world of evil, of wrongdoing, right? If you're killing any criminal just off the basis of them being a criminal, then yeah, you're fulfilling that. And that's, again, like clearly that worked to an extent of reducing crime by so much and stopping all wars. I feel like that's a big one. um Honestly, okay, especially for the argument of like, oh, well, he didn't stop the root of the crime, like I was talking about before. My brother in Christ, he stopped all war. Like, I feel like we're not focusing on the main thing here. Like, I would assume that the war issue is a little bit more important. So crazy that you're like hung up on he didn't stop crime by 100%. Like, yeah, kind of obviously, because again, especially if you think about, oh, just like petty crime, like little small things, like freaking. If I get a speeding ticket, does that mean I should be killed in Light's eyes? Like, probably not. So, like, I feel like it's more just a matter of it's 70% of crime because it's not including petty crimes. I don't know. I don't know. I just feel like it's kind of goofy. Um, but let's see what the chat thinks. Let's see. Mm. All right, you guys going back and forth about Light's age and how much that makes his decisions valid. Hmm. Right, okay, yeah. Stopping wars is huge, and you can assume murders drastically fell too. Exactly. Like, so many wars also originate from, you know, lots of crime happening first, like different conflicts and disagreements that more so would still just be considered a crime, and it escalates to the state of a full-on war. So in general, it's also just preventing like the domino effect of more wars happening in the future. So, less murder, less genocide, probably just at the closest that we could get to world peace, as far as I understand. So, um, bum, 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 bum. I don't know. Overall, like I said, I feel as though I wouldn't consider Light a villain. I feel like, he's seen as that one because he does act a little crazy sometimes. He has this very psychotic anime crash outs, freaking maniacally laughing and whatever. But I think that's more for just the presentation of the show and everything. Um, even if suppose he actually went crazy. He has this big crazy god complex of being referred to as Kira, and he feels as though he is God. Okay, like he kind of is though. Like by all definitions, he has an otherworldly, inhuman power, and he's using it to try to essentially rewrite the state of the world. Um, so in a way, I think that would make him a god. It would put him in a league above all other humans. And so yeah, he's probably gonna have a bit of a god complex about that. But regardless, because especially when people are like, oh, like he's a narcissist and that's why he's a villain, or like I said, he is a god but complex and that's why he's a villain. I don't necessarily think that his psychological state takes away from the good that he has done. Like, okay, sure, he might be a little bit crazy, he might be a little bit like arrogant or selfish or whatever else, but you can't deny the good that he has still done of, again, stopping pretty much all violence across the board. Um so I don't know. I don't know. We'll take another water break. My throat hurts. Man, my straw is enough to get to the bottom of my water bottle. So moving on to the final character I want to talk about. This is a character that often gets compared to Light, for a lot of reasons, but Lelouch from Code Geass. He has a somewhat similar goal of essentially saving the world in a way, ridding the world of evil. Because in the show Code Geass, there's the big evil bad guys, Britannia. They're super bad, super big. They're like this rich royal family, and they oppress the Japanese people. Just they're very corrupt. Now Lelouch himself was born of the royal Britannian family, but just due to certain things that happened, he understands that Britannia is very corrupt and bad, and so yeah, I think he's like just in high school, but even at that age, he's fully aware of the fact that Britannia is very evil, and he wishes that he could stop that corruption because their own corruption has hurt his loved ones. Um, so once again, similar to Light, he acquires essentially a godlike power, and it's the Geass. It gives him the power to where if he's looking in someone's eyes, he can command them to do whatever he wants. Like literally, whatever he says, they will do it. Um, so Lelouch uses his power to start is trying to save the world, to essentially revolt against Britannia and just, rid the world of this evil. Um, there's a lot more to it. He joins up with like these rebel forces. It's also a bit of a Gundam show, so you got like your big fighting robots. That's a part of it. But um like I said, he joins up with the rebel forces since they're already trying to fight against Britannia. Um but he this entire time he wears like essentially I guess a costume. He wears a mask and he creates this persona of Zero. And Zero is, presented as like the savior for the Japanese people. Um so I will say I haven't watched the show in a bit, so my memory is a little bit foggy on like exact things that I could call back to, but um basically from what I do remember, um like I said, he has the power of the Geass. He can command people to do whatever he wants. So he does use this to command some of the Britannian people, especially like the people that he's fighting against, like the generals and whatever else. He'll command them to do certain things. But basically, it's a situation in which it almost seems like Lelouch is kind of torn because he wants to, like I said, he wants to stop Britannia. And so in creating the Zero persona, he wants to present this like strong savior, like hero character. Um, but like Lelouch is still a freaking teenager, and more specifically, like at least internally, he's not as cold and like strong-willed as he comes off as the Zero persona. Like especially when he talks about his little sister, that's like honestly he's doing a lot of this for his little sister to help her and like save her and whatnot. You see that side of him where he clearly like really loves her and he does have this like caring side to him. So whatever, a bunch of stuff happens. It's also personally, okay, it was hot take, but I would say that Lelouch is cooler than Light, and overall Code Geass is better than Death Note. I'm gonna say it down. I feel as though Code Geass has a much more fleshed out story when it comes to the main character enacting their plan of playing God and saving the world. Um, because we get to see more sides of Lelouch and his struggles with this godlike power, and you know, just it's also like to be fair, you because although with Death Note, it's more of just a general evil of like criminals. With Code Geass, it's a specific evil of this actual group of people, the Britannians. So we also just get to see the Britannians side of thing. Um, so I don't know, but I do think in general, like I would say Code Geass is a lot more interesting than Death Note in the fact that things can be a lot more fleshed out. Also, I'm just biased because there's really cool robot fights and it kind of just goes hard. So, um but yeah, it's just more specifically Lelouch learns from his mistakes. And I think that that's something that really sets him apart from Light. Light kind of messes up a lot, but anytime that Light messes up, it just like pisses him off, and then he just kind of gets a little bit more villainous, and that he'll like then do some other crazy thing to like get past his mistake, to then complete his plan. But with Lelouch, he first of all, Lelouch definitely kills a lot more people than Light, and he also definitely kills a lot more innocents. Because there's a certain situation in which he accidentally uses his Geass on this Britannian princess character, And so basically he accidentally instructs her to kill all the, because it was like the princess was talking about some stuff. There's a big crowd of people watching her. Yeah, Lelouch tells her to kill all those people, and he didn't realize that his Gios was active. So he controls her to kill all those people. So Lelouch, and I could be remembering wrong, but I think she died too, and I think that was someone who, like, Lelouch did also care about. I could be super wrong about that. Like I said, I haven't watched the show in a while, but regardless, um, Lelouch is kind of like, damn, just committed a bunch of genocide. Whoopsies. um, so he there's several times throughout the show where he actually takes a step back and takes a look at his actions and realizes, like, his initial plan of saving the world and stopping Britannia, it's not going too well. Like, it's still working. They're definitely still making progress on taking down Britannia, but there's been a lot of innocent lives lost along the way, and in general, just a lot of things have played out in ways that he wasn't even expecting. Um, because I think Lelouch sees himself as a very calculated person. Even like the first scene of the first episode is him playing chess against this other character, and it's kind of just sets up like his entire philosophy, where he moves the king piece first, and his opponent asks him, like, why would you do that? And he says, he's like, why, how can I expect my soldiers to follow if the king doesn't lead the example? Something along the lines of that. But it clearly, that's clearly kind of his philosophy, especially for the Zero character. Of, again, like, he needs to be this great leader. He needs to be the one to lead the charge and to set the example of how his people need to follow. So I think in general, there's so much more pressure on Lelouch to save the world, because now it's people know him, even though, like, there's really not anyone that, like, knows that Lelouch is Zero. But for the people that know Zero, and like I said, like the rebels and stuff that he's working with, they are expecting so much out of him. They're obviously expecting him to be this savior that he claims he's going to be. So that's why I'm saying, like, I think there's just a lot more problems that Lelouch has to face, not only externally but internally. Um, so, um, let's see. Was it who wins in a battle, Lelouch or Light? I feel like Lelouch. Like, all Light has is the Death Note, and unless he can immediately get Lelouch's full government aim, then can't really do anything about that. But also, like, all Lelouch has to do is just look him in the eyes and be like, "Hey, bro, jump off a bridge or something," and boom, Lelouch wins. So yeah, Lelouch is definitely taking that dub. Um, but yeah. Anyways, it's just because I've gone on a whole tangent. To summarize, in the end, Lelouch as Zero, like wearing the Zero getup, Lelouch basically sacrifices himself in public, like in front of a whole crowd. Um, and it's specifically, he has his friend. His friend is part of the Britannian army. That's like a whole thing. They were childhood friends, so that's like another conflict for Lelouch, because his bestie is part of the bad guys, so that creates like conflict for him. Whatever. But Lelouch has his friend kill him, like I said, like very publicly, um, because it kind of then cements Lelouch as like a martyr. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. It's disgusting. But um, yeah, I mean, once again, I keep saying Lelouch, but that was as Zero, him as Zero, whatever else. Um, but I think that's especially what makes Lelouch stand apart from Light, because Lelouch was able to recognize he kind of needs to die. He needs to, like I said, be a martyr, and he can't just continue to have this godlike power. He can't, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, he, I think the main difference is like Light, even when Light had his back up against the wall, he was losing, he was being exposed by everyone, like he was finally caught as Kira. Um, he still like couldn't accept the fact that he lost, and he freaking ran away until he died. Um, but I think Lelouch understood that Lelouch, in a way, also lost, but he was willing to accept that, and more so kind of use it as just a final move to his advantage of, you know what, like I said, I'm going to make myself a martyr, and I'm going to change the course of how things are currently going by making this sacrifice. Um, so I don't know, just to kind of more specifically compare the two, they definitely are comparable. Because like I said, they both acquire a godlike power. They both have the intentions of saving the world, ridding the world of evil. Um, they both kill innocents in the process. Um, but I do think, like I said, what really sets them apart is their overall personalities and mindset on how they're going to go about ridding the world of evil. Now, to be fair, um, Light was kind of alone in his journey, in his path to saving the world. Um, yes, he had Misa, but I mean, he kind of like didn't even care about Misa. I feel like he didn't like really take in her opinions or anything that often. And if anything, the person that he was spending the most time with, L, that's his main issue. Like L is the main person trying to take him down, and the one who is most likely to take him down. So like I said, I think Light was just so alone in his quest to save the world. So he didn't even have anyone to like bounce ideas off of, to be like, hey bro, do you think I should kill this criminal or what? Like, he didn't have that option. But Lelouch, on the other hand, even though, I imagine this probably still had some effect on his mental state, to where, like I said, he couldn't really be himself as Lelouch. He always had to present himself as Zero. He still had people to talk to about what was going on, and about his plans to try to save the world. um, so yeah, I would say they're definitely comparable in a lot of ways, but overall they still have their differences. But more specifically, I do still think that, one, Code Geass is just better, much better show. That's just my bias. But I think I can definitely admit that it's just because of the way that Code Geass is. It has a better, like, it's able to flesh things out better, and we get to see more sides of both sides of the story, and just Lelouch's own mental struggles and whatnot. Um, so with that being said, I'm gonna take another little peek at the chat here. Um, all right, just follow up to the other question that was asked here. Yeah, but could Light discover his identity before Lelouch could find Light? That's interesting, because yeah, definitely a big part of Light, the way that Light goes about things, is to be very careful, and you know almost like cat and mouse esque, obviously, how we see with him and L. I, it's a tricky hypothetical because on the one hand, obviously it would just depend on what were the circumstances of uh like Light and Lelouch meeting. I'm kind of picturing it as like if we were almost to merge the two universes. I'm picturing it as like Light would hear about Zero on the news, right? Because obviously Light is watching the news very often to hear about criminals. And at least at the start of things, Zero was like only seen as a criminal, um, since he was going up against Britannia. So I think what it could be is that, like I said, Light would see Zero on the news. He would just see him being portrayed as this criminal, especially if it was at the time of Zero having like killed a few people. So I think that would compel Light to try to hunt Zero down and find out who this person is. Um, so it would more so be a matter of like, how does Lelouch hear about Light? Um, like in what way does Light come up in Lelouch's or Zero's path to where, especially like if any red flags were set off for Lelouch of like, oh dang, this guy like is trying to kill me or something. Um, so I don't know. It's a tricky hypothetical, but I do still think Lelouch would beat him. One, just because I feel like the Gios power is a little bit more flexible than the Death Note. Um, since he doesn't need the person's name, he just has to look at them. Um, and I think it would be because I don't think Zero's like true identity was even ever like revealed to the public. So I found it hard to believe that Light would be able to figure out who Zero really is. And I imagine in his quest to find that out, he eventually would, set off some kind of alarms to Lelouch that this person is after him. And so most likely Lelouch would just take care of the problem before like could get too far. So crazy hypothetical, but I do think that Lelouch wins every time. Um, so ba, ba, ba. Anyways, okay, I'll leave you guys with this. Someone asked, "Do you have any other magical girl recommendations?" Wonder Egg Priority. It's super underrated. It's like 12 episodes, something like that. It's chef's kiss. Just don't watch the special episode. Listen, guys, I love the show. Definitely one of my favorite magical girl shows. It was just a circumstance of the animators being rushed and them not having enough time to finish things properly and whatnot. So I don't think it actually reflects badly on the show itself, but just don't watch the special episode because it's not special. It's not special. Don't watch it. But aside from that, 10 out of 10, very good magical girl anime. Mwah, love it. But yeah, that's just the little villain characters that I wanted to talk to you all about today. I hope you enjoyed my yapping. If you want to hear me yap more, please let me know. Let me know what you want me to yap about more. And yeah, thanks for watching. It's super nice to have you all here. Bye.